Hey friends, how you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tzadi Beis, Daf 92 of Masechta Yevamos. Friends, maybe my sister-in-law Ashley is going to make a mistake and come down here by accident, and we'll chop her. We'll get her into Babylon Talmud. Wouldn't that be so funny? Alright, let's see. Right, so today we're going to wrap up the first Mishnah of, I think it was the first Mishnah of the Perek. Got us quite far, that first Mishnah. What Perek are we even doing anymore? So we got from Pei Zayin to Tzadi Aleph on that Mishnah. It's a good ride, I think. Anyways, yes, we're gonna wrap up that Mishnah and start a new Mishnah about like Yevamos. So, alright, we're gonna start in Daf Tzadi Beis Amud Aleph. 3 lines into the page. Nises al pi bezdin teitze v'chule. So if she, so there was one witness says that her husband's gestorben. So then she gets married to some other fellow. Right? Bezdin said, okay, you can get married to another fellow, and she does. And then it turns out that her original husband, in fact, was not gestorben. So then we say, okay, she's got to get divorced from both. Excuse me, I got to sneeze. Sneeze complete. So now she gets divorced from both, and then we say that because she kind of had she was going by the advice, or what's that called? Advice, I guess, of Bezdin. She doesn't have to bring a korban. Omer Zeiri says Zeiri Leisa lemasnisin. Of course, now that I'm starting to record, everybody decides now is the time to yell. Anyways, so Amr Zeiri, Leis L'Masnisin. So Zeiri says, yeah, even though the Mishnah says that she doesn't have to bring a korban, the truth is that she does have to bring a korban. Midetani be midrashe, from the fact that it was taught in the Beis Hamedrash, Detani be midrashe, Horu bezdin sheshoko chamo uvasov zarcho. If it was Shabbos l'maise, and oh good, somebody just left the house. It was Ashley, which means that we're probably not going to be able to chop her around so quickly, but the good thing is the less people to make noise, the better. Anyways, so we saw in the Beis Hamedrash that if it was Shabbos and Bezdin says, look, it's cloudy outside. Well, no, not it's cloudy outside. It's dark outside. It's dark outside, so Shabbos is over. Go. I don't know. What do you guys like to do on Motzei Shabbos? I'll tell you what I do on Motzei Shabbos. Most of the time, either I record Babylon Talmud or I go to sleep. If it's like mamish the middle of the winter where Shabbos ends really early, then maybe I have like an hour to do something else. But then it's like, what the heck am I going to do for an hour? So I just go to sleep earlier and wake up earlier. And then just get started earlier and let's go weiter. So Horu Bezdin Sheshaka Chama. So if Bezdin said, okay, well, Shabbos is over, and it turns out it was just a cloudy day, and the sun shone. So the question is, how do we relate to this? Do we relate to it like, okay, well, look, if a fellow went and he recorded Babylon Talmud because he thought that Shabbos was over, and it turned out that Shabbos was not over, it was just cloudy, so do we say, well, Bezdin gave you the green light, so the fellow is going to be potter for recording Babylon Talmud? Or do we say, no, Bezdin didn't give you a green light. Bezdin simply made a mistake, right? It's not like they paskined that Shabbos is over. They said, look, from what we could tell, it's dark out. Shabbos is over. It turned out that they were wrong. So what do you want me to... So that's not like Bezdin gave you a green light. Bezdin made a mistake. And therefore, yeah, certainly you would have to be... you'd have to bring a korban chatas for recording Babylon Talmud on Shabbos. So again, I'm starting from the beginning. Amr Zeiri says, Zeiri leis l'masnisin, that our Mishnah l'maiseh is... the halacha is not like that, right? The Mishnah says that she'd be potter from bringing a korban chatas, since she did based on their advice. I feel like there's a better word than advice over here, but I can't think of what it is, and it's not important enough for me to take your precious time trying to think of what word might be better. Midutani Bey Midrashe, from the fact, but there's always time. Let's go weiter. Midutani Bey Midrashe, from the fact that it was on the Beis Hamedrash. Midutani Bey Midrashe, Horu Bezdin that if Bezdin said, okay, so Shabbos is over, in the end, the sun shone, and it turns out that Memele Shabbos was not over. They made a mistake. This is not like a psak halacha of Bezdin, which would therefore, give individuals the cover of Bezdin so that they wouldn't have to bring a korban chatas. Elatos. It's simply a mistake that Bezdin made, and if in this case you recorded Babylon Talmud on Shabbos, so then you'd have to bring a korban chatas. Rav Nachman Omer harahi. Rav Nachman disagrees, and Rav Nachman says that when Bezdin paskins that this woman is permitted to get married to a second fellow, they're not just saying that your husband is dead and therefore you're allowed to get remarried, and when it turns out that he's actually alive, they made a mistake. No, Rav Nachman says it's more than that. Rav Nachman is basically saying that there's a psak over here. Rav Nachman is saying that what Bezdin is basically saying is that, look, there's a reason why we trust one witness, or really what it is that we're not trusting the witness, we're trusting that this woman is going to do her research to make sure that the husband is really dead before marrying another fellow. And therefore, it's not simply that Bezdin is saying, okay, we could trust this witness to say that he's really dead, and when it turns out that he's alive, they made a mistake. That's not what it is. That Bezdin is saying, okay, we have one witness, now you go do your research, make sure that this is really the case, and then you can get remarried, and that stands. And therefore, if based on Bezdin's advice, she went and got remarried, and it turns out that the husband is alive, well, she's part of being a korban because, Bezdin gave her the green light. So Rav Nachman Omar Harahi, Rav Nachman says, no, Taka is a psak of Bezdin, and she's part of bringing a korban. Rav Nachman Teida. Rav Nachman says, you should know that this is the case, that it's a psak halacha, the b'chol haTorah kula, eid echad lo meheimen. In general, of course, one witness is not believed. And, as far as we're concerned, that applies here as well. It's not that the witness is believed, yet over here he is believed, but the point is, my time, why is he believed? Is it not because that it's a psak Bezdin? Meaning, it's not that we're believing the witness. We don't believe one witness. We need two witnesses. What's happening over here is that in this particular case, Bezdin is saying, you know what? As long as we have one witness, we could therefore rely upon this woman that she's going to do her research before, and ascertain that her husband's gestorben before getting remarried. And therefore, if it turns out that the husband's taka alive, so then, look, Bezdin made their psak, and she's part of, she has the cover of Bezdin, she doesn't have to bring a korban chatas. Rava says, Teda de Tausu. Rava says, Mapitom, it's a mistake that Bezdin made, and she does not have the cover of Bezdin. Bezdin made a mistake. They had assumed that he was dead. It turns out that he was alive. They made a mistake. She has to bring a korban chatos. For example, if Bezdin, right, in contrast to our case, by this woman whose husband dies, if it would come to an example of chelev or dam, le'atera, that they said that it was mutter for whatever reason, and then they realized that no, this is actually osur. If they then change their mind and decide, it actually really is mutter, like we initially said, we don't simply trust them off the bat. They would have to give a reason for it. They'd have to really explain why they're changing their mind again. Sharina, whereas in this case, if one witness comes and says that her husband is gestorben, asu tre asarna, and then if two more witnesses come and say no, actually the husband is alive. I mean, he hasn't showed up, but two witnesses come and say no, taka, the husband's alive. So then we don't allow her to get remarried. Ki hadar also aid achrina sharina lo. And then if another witness would come and say, no, actually the husband is gestorben, is dead, then we do, right? We go back to believing this story, right? We go back to believing that the husband is gestorben. My timer, how come? Is it not because it is a mistake, right? Meaning, as we saw with the chelev and the dam, if it was that they gave a psak, so then if they renege again, right? So if they said that the dam or the chelev was permitted, and then they said it's also, if they want to make it permitted again, they have to give a reason for it. They have to give an explanation for why it should be permitted. And yet, when it comes to this woman whose husband died, so we trust one witness. If two witnesses then come and say, no, he is alive, but then another witness comes out and says, Taka is dead, we believe him. Why? Mistam, it's because we're assuming that, okay, for initially when the first witness came and said he was dead, so we believed him. Then when two more witnesses came and said that, no, he's alive, we said, okay, he must have made a mistake. But then when the third witness comes back, we go back and say, like, okay, I guess he really is dead. Right? So the point is that it's not based on like a psak halacha. It's just based on what we seem to be understanding about if this person is giving the facts or not. And we seem to be saying, okay, yeah, the fellow really is dead, and therefore she can get remarried. So it does seem to be not based on a psak of Bezdin per se, but based on, is she married, isn't she married, and therefore, in our case in the Mishnah, if Bezdin said that she's allowed to get remarried, and then it turns out that that the husband's really alive, so clearly they made a mistake, and he's alive, and therefore she would have to bring a korban chatas. Even Rabbi Eliezer says that Bezdin made a mistake, and that she would have to bring a korban. Titania is willing to Bryce Rabbi Eliezer. Omer says Rabbi Eliezer, Yikov adin sahar, that the law pierced the mountain, bore a hole through the mountain. V'tavi chatas shmena, and let her bring a big gezunte korban chatas. Yomet b'shlomo d'tausu. I understand if we say that Bezdin made a mistake, mishum achi masi korban. That's why she has to bring a korban. Eli yomet orahi amay masi korban. But if we say that Bezdin gave a psak halacha, then why would she have to bring a korban? She has the cover of Bezdin. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that if an individual does based on Bezdin, he's chayav a korban chatas. We've been assuming until now, that if Bezdin gives a psak halacha for a fellow, and it turned out that they made a mistake, so he did it with the cover of Bezdin, he would be potter from bringing a korban chatas. But maybe Rabbi Eliezer holds that actually, when a fellow does something based on the opinion of Bezdin, he actually would have to bring a korban chatas. But if so, then what's the whole sort of emphatic, dramatic kind of statement that Rabbi Eliezer says that, I don't know, the halacha needs to pierce through the mountains, right? That meaning if we're simply a halacha of like, no, she has to bring a korban because she went to Bezdin made a mistake, and if Bezdin makes a mistake, you have to bring a korban. So that's not so. It doesn't need this dramatic statement of Yikov adin sahar. Right, so rather, from the fact that Rabbi Eliezer had to get so dramatic, it was because, no, in general, if a fellow does based on the psak of Bezdin, he would be potter from bringing a korban. But in this case, it's not the psak of Bezdin, it's that Bezdin made a mistake over here, and therefore she would have to bring a korban chatos. Now, the Mishnah had said, Harua Bezdin li nosef v'chulei. So if Bezdin said that she's allowed to get remarried, but then she went out and like kilkala, we have to define what kilkala means. So then that would not be allowed. It's a chayev b'korban. She has to bring a korban chadash le'tirua ela linase, says the Mishnah, that they only permitted her to get married, not to be kilkala. My kilkala affect the Gemara. What does kilkala mean? Rabbi Elazar Omer says Rabbi Elazar zinso. Okay, if she had an inappropriate relationship after Bezdin said she can get married, and she had some other kind of a relationship, so then she has to bring a korban chadas. Rabbi Yochanan Omer says Rabbi Yochanan Amon l'kohen gadol gush v'achlus l'kohen edgit. Right? That no, it means that apparently, absolutely. All right. Okay. Back to the Gemara. So it means Amon l'kohen gadol gush v'achlus l'kohen edgit. Meaning, if Bezdin says that she's allowed to get remarried, and then she goes and marries you're right, she's a situation of Amon l'kohen gadol, a grusha v'achlus l'kohen hedjed. Of course, in that case, Bezdin wasn't saying that she could do that, right? Because that's never going to be allowed. So then she has to bring a korban chatos. Man de omer zinsa kolshken Amon l'kohen gadol. Fine. So the Rabbi Elazar who says that it means that she had an inappropriate relationship. So then certainly he would say also that in the case of Amon l'kohen gadol, grusha v'achlus l'kohen hedjed, which is never going to be allowed. So then she would have to bring a korban. And just to clarify, so zinsa means meaning she has a relationship, not a marriage, though, right? Meaning that's what it means in this case, right? It means Meaning Bezdin says you can go and get married, and instead she goes and has a relationship with some other guy, not necessarily somebody that she's not allowed to be with, but just not marriage. Bezdin said you can get married, and she ended up having an outside of marriage relationship with somebody else. So according to Rabbi Elazar, who says that that's the case where she has to bring a korban, so then certainly in the case of Aman al-Kohen Gadol, Gush v'Chutz l'Kohen Hedjed, which is never going to be permitted. Manda Amar Aman al-Kohen Gadol. But according to Manda Amar, who says that you have to bring a korban in the case of Aman al-Kohen Gadol, Havazin Salo, but if she was, had some relationship with some other guy, she would not have to bring a korban chatos, because my time in the Amra Atun hu the Shavisin Pinuya. Because she'll say, hey, people, Bezdin people, you said that I'm no longer married. Let me do what I want. Okay? But Aman al-Kohen Gadol Gush v'Chutz l'Kohen Hedjed would not be allowed. Fine. Tani Kavasa de B'Yochanan, we take Lemaise have a Brisa supporting Rabbi Yochanan, Harua Bezdin li'inase, that if Bezdin says, friend, our very holy friendly sister, you're allowed to get married, and she went and she kilkulad. Kigon, for example, Aman al-Kohen Gadol, Gush v'Chutz l'Kohen Hedjed. For example, in Almana, she was an Almana, she married a Kohen Gadol. She was a Gush v'Chutz, she married a Kohen Hedjed. Chayev is b'korban, she's going to have to bring a korban. Hakol bia uvia, for each bia that she has, Divrei Belazar, Divrei Eliezer, v'chacham the chacham say korban echad ala kol, one korban for all the bias that she has. Ubodim chacham Elazar, but the rabbis admit, however, to Rabbi Elazar, shem nos l'chamisha b'nei adam, shem nises l'chamisha b'nei adam, that if she got married in this manner, I guess as a Aman al-Kohen Gadol, Gush v'Chutz l'Kohen Hedjed, to 5 different individuals, shechayev is b'korban hakol echad ve'echad, that should be chayev to bring a korban for each one of these individuals, since there are different bodies, different people. So we see that apparently Kilkala is referring to Aman al-Kohen Gadol, Gush v'Chutz l'Kohen Hedjed, like Reb Yochanan. Okay, friends, moving on to a new Mishnah. You have Epis, a woman, and her husband and her son went traveling someplace. And they came with sad news that her husband and her son both died. And they also report that the husband died first, which means that at the time that her husband died, she had a child, or I guess technically more significant here is that he had a child, and therefore, he had offspring at that time, and therefore, we don't need to do Yibum or anything, just like a update of what's going on over here. So Ashley left again. Apparently she snuck in while I wasn't paying attention. She left again. But the thing is, there's a phone conversation. So we have, we have to forget. There's a lot of moving pieces here. We have the people who are here physically, and we have people who are here via the telephone. So Ashley has left the premises, but we got my niece on the phone calling in from the United States. So that's sort of the current update. Okay, fine, great. So fine. So they say, okay, your husband died first, but at the time that he died, your son was still alive. And therefore, you don't have to do yibum. Venise, so she got married to somebody else. But then they said to her, chilufayu advarim. Actually, really sorry to say, but it was the opposite. Your son died first, and then your husband, which means that when your husband died, he did not have any children, and actually you were not allowed to get married to somebody else. You have to do yibum. Teisei v'avolod rishon v'achron mamzer. So then she can no longer remain with this other fellow who she married, and the child, if they had any children, the Gemara is going to ask, what does it mean, rishon and achron, the first and the last? What does that mean? But if she had children, so then the child would be a mamzer, because she had a child with a fellow who she was not allowed to be married with when she was supposed to do yibum. If they said to her, your son died, and then afterwards your husband died, which means that when your husband died, he didn't have any children, and therefore you have to do yibum. So she did yibum. But then they say actually it was the opposite, that your husband died and then your son died, which means that you were not meant to do yibum, and therefore it's just achos isha eishes ach. So Teitze, so she has to break up over there. V'avalad rishon v'achron mamzer, and if there were any children, then there would be a mamzer because she basically married her husband's brother, and that's not allowed. Okay. If they said to her that your husband died, v'nises, and then she got married, you hear the question? You hear what happened? That they said to her that her husband gestorben. So then she went and got remarried, and she has a baby. You know what they say to her? They say to her, actually, we kind of made a mistake. Your husband was actually alive. Okay, sorry, distraction. So they said, actually, your husband was alive, but now he's dead. So in that case, Teitze v'avolod rishon mamzer v'achron eino mamzer. So we say that she cannot remain with him. And if she had a child before she found, if she had a child at the time that the husband was still alive, that child would be a mamzer, because she had a child with somebody else when she was still married to the first fellow. And but if she had a child after the husband died, so then that child is not a mamzer. Okay. Amula, if they said to her, Meiz bailech, that your husband died, v'niskacha, so she got betrothed to another fellow, v'achakach ba baila, and then who shows up? The husband. Mutar lachzor lo, she's permitted to go back to him. Afapishin osun lo achrun get lo poslu minakuna, and even if the fellow who betrothed her gives her a get, the get is irrelevant. She is still kosher to marry a kohen. As Odar Shabalozu ben Masya, Shabalozu ben Masya made the following exposition: V'isha grusha meisha v'lo meish she'eno grusha. That when the pasuk says by a kohen that he's not allowed to marry an isha grusha meisha, is not allowed to marry a divorcee, so v'lo meish she'eno isha, that does not apply to someone who's divorced from somebody who was not actually married, who she was not actually married to, right? Meaning in this case, her original husband was still alive, so she wasn't actually married to the second fellow, so that get is basically irrelevant. Alright, that sounds nice. My rishon or my achron? No. So the question that everybody was wondering about, that when the Mishnah says that if her husband and her son went on a trip and they came back and said, your husband died and then your son died, so then she went and marries some other guy. And then it turns out that actually her son first, in which case she wasn't allowed to marry some other guy. She was supposed to do Yibum. Anyways, we say that the first and last child are mamzers. So what does that mean? What's the first? What's the last? If it means that, well, the Rishon means before she found out, and then I guess before she found out that it was the other way around, and then the Achron is a child that she had after she found out that it was the other way around. Lesni Avlad Mamzer. I mean, if we're saying that in both cases the child is a Mamzer, just simply say that the child is a Mamzer. Who cares if it's Rishon or Achron? So the answer is, well, because in the continuation of the Mishnah we say, Amrullah, that if they said to her, Meiz bailech, that your husband died, V'nisei, so then she got married, V'acharkach, Amrullah, Kayim hoyo v'meis. And then afterwards they say, actually we made a mistake, he was alive, but now he's dead. So we say, in that case, Harishon Mamzer v'achron eno Mamzer. So in that case we make a distinction. And we say, well, a child that was born before she heard that he was actually alive but then died, so that child would be a Mamzer, but any child born after that would not be a Mamzer. So because there was a distinction there between Rishon and Achron, so Tananami Reisha, Rishon v'Achron Mamzer. So also in the Reisha we said the first and last are a Mamzer, but really it's basically saying that any child that they have together would be a Mamzer. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Zo Divrei Rabbi Akiva. This is Dafka, the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, She'omer Kiddushin Tovsim B'chayvei Lavin, who says that there's no Kiddushin by lavs, right? Meaning our Mishnah had said that these people come and tell her your husband and your son died, and that your husband died first, which means that when your husband died, he had a child, and therefore you're potter from Yibum. So, and then they come back and say, actually we got it wrong, your child died first and then your husband, which means that your husband died without children, and really you have to do Yibum. Which means that, so now, when she got the news that her husband died and then her son, and she went and got married to some other guy, but it turns out that really her son died first, so she was supposed to do Yibum. So it's basically a Shomeres Yavam who got married to some other guy. So now the thing is, that's just a lav. right? It says, right, Losia Eshes Hames Achutza, right? It's a lav. She shouldn't marry some other person. And yet we're saying that the child is a mamzer. So this is the opinion, right? So we're saying, Zodivri Rabbi Akiva, this is according to Rabbi Akiva, Shaya Omer, in Kiddushin Tovsim B'chai V'Lavin, who says that Kiddushin does not work by lavs, and the child would be a mamzer. The Chacham say, Ein mamzer mi Yevama, that there is no mamzer in the case of a Yevama who gets married to somebody else. V'lema ein mamzer mi Chai V'Lavin. Why not say, if it's the Chacham's opinion, the Chacham say that there's no mamzers from lavin, from negative prohibition. So Hachtana de Rabbi Akiva, who de Omar Michai V'Lavin de She'er Havi Mamzer, Michai V'Lavin Gredi Lo Havi Mamzer. So actually we say, maybe somebody's back. Maybe Ashley's back. Maybe she's going to come down here by accident. So this is not the opinion of the rabbis. This is the opinion of Tana Devei Rabbi Akiva that we had seen. Where did we see this? We saw this on a different page somewhere. That right, the question of what exactly is Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Does Rabbi Akiva say that there's no kiddushin by any lav or specific lavs? So this is the opinion of the Tana Devei Rabbi Akiva, who says that when Rabbi Akiva says that there's no kiddushin by lavin and that the child is a mamzer, it's only lavin that are like family related lavin. For example, right, Rabbi Yehuda says that you're not allowed to marry, you would be unable to marry somebody who was raped by your father or something. That's a lav. Okay, so now in that case, Rabbi Akiva would say that there would be mamzer, right? That would be no kiddushin, and the child would be a mamzer. But something like this, which is nothing to do with family, right? She's marrying some other random person because she thought that she didn't have to do yibum. So in that case, Tana Devei Rabbi Akiva would say that she does not, that the child is not a mamzer. But the ratio where we say that the child is a mamzer is Rabbi Akiva's opinion, who says that even in cases unrelated to family matters, the child would be a mamzer in the case of a lav, such as a Yevama marrying some other person other than her Yavam. Omer Yehuda Merav Hua. So it says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. Menanche in Kiddushin Tofsim bi Yevame. How do we know that Kiddushin is not Tofis by Yevama? Friends, do you hear this? It's pretty interesting stuff, right? So if you have a Shomeres Yavam, right? Reuven is married to Sarah. Reuven goes to Wellwood. Shimon now needs to do Yibum with Sarah, or, I guess from this perspective, Sarah needs to do Yibum with Shimon, right? There's a Yibum, a Zika thing going on. So now, let's say some other fellow comes and Chapsarain, and he's Mekadesh Sarah. So says Rav, that doesn't work. There's no Kiddushin by Yevama. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Lucia Eishes Hames Achutza Leish Zar, that the wife of the deceased should not marry some other fellow. Lo teiba avoya. It says lo siya. Siya is like havoya, kiddushin. So lo sehei ba havoya lizar. There's no kiddushin by any other fellow. Shmuel Amar says Shmuel ba'ani yosenu tzricha get, that because of our because we don't because we're poor-minded people, we don't know enough, we don't really understand the intent of the pasuk. We do need to, right? Tzricha get misveka. She does need to get a get from this other fellow who betrothed her out of suffix, out of doubt, that we're not sure if kiddushin is tofis or not. I'm sorry. Bani Yosenu tzricha get. She needs a get. Now, Masaf Kalei Shmuel is uncertain. Hai lo siya eishes hameis. That when the pasuk says, oh, I was hoping it was Ashley. Okay, sorry. But it's okay. It's my mom. Mom, come over. Let's embarrass you. Okay. Mom.
Sully, I know your new strategy.
But you have to get embarrassed.
If you end up embarrassing everybody, then nobody's going to come downstairs because they don't want to be embarrassed. That's your strategy. Rather than saying, don't come down, if people come down, then they get embarrassed.
What do you guys think? You guys think it's right or not? I don't think so. But I don't know. I got confused. It sounded like a complicated svar. I don't know. I don't do good with complicated things. I like to do things simple. Which is funny because, sometimes Rashi will point out that the Gemara tries to be simple. But the thing is, obviously the Gemara is super complicated. But I guess the point that Rashi is trying to make is that, Gemara is complicated, but, but you still do want to try to keep it as simple as possible. I'll give you an example. Computer programming could be complicated, but you still want to keep things nice and neat and not make a mess, because that's how we get bugs, which we know we don't like bugs. So the trick is to take complicated things and make them simple. So I got to do chazar with my mom on the svara a little bit later. But what do you guys think?
Actually, Ashley's svara.
Oh, it's Ashley's svara. Yeah, Ashley's hiding. Let's go weiter. Don't worry.
Okay, so weiter.
Weiter. Okay, my mom realizes that she's gonna have to listen to this at some point, and she's got stuff to do. All right. Well, that's good. All right. Well, basically, Bekitzer, Ashley's gonna make a mistake sooner or later. Let's move on. Where were we? So Shmuel wasn't sure. Misapkele Shmuel, Hai Losia Eishes Hamesh, that when it says Losia Eishes Hamesh, that the wife of the deceased should not be Lilav Uda also, is it coming to say that it's simply a lav, a negative prohibition? Prohibition. I Telotav Seba Kiddushin Uda also, or is it saying that Kiddushin doesn't work? Okay, so Right Shmuel is just not sure what to do of Losia. Right, what do you make of this Losia thing? Is it simply saying that she shouldn't marry anybody else, which is just simply a lab that doesn't, but Kiddushin can still be Tofes as long as you're not Rabbi Akiva? Or does it mean Losia that there shouldn't be any Kiddushin? He's not sure, and therefore he says that that she should get a get. Fine. Of Mari Bar Rachel. Who's of Mari Bar Rachel? I think it was Shmuel's grandson. I think Shmuel's daughter was Rachel, and she was taken captive, and I think that she was conceived by one of her captors, and had this child, Mari, and then so they went by her name as opposed to his captor father's name. Fine. So Omer le Rav Mari Bar Rachel le Rav Ashi Achi Omer. Remember this is what Rav says. Halacha kavos de Shmuel. That the halacha is like Shmuel, that she would need a get. Amar Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, Hashtad Amar Amemar, now that Amemar says that the halacha is like Shmuel, which means that if my brother's yelling for some reason. There's Ashley, but she's not coming down. She's just making noise. And now my brother is. We have to go weiter. Friends, I'm sorry. Whenever sort of the family's around, it's complicated because, as you know, Babylon Talmud needs to be recorded every day, even on days where there's 1 million people here and it's noisy. So, and the problem for you also is that those days tend to be like Fridays, and Fridays I tend to like record more than one. So, now that Amemar says that the halacha is like Shmuel, that if she needs to do Yibum, and some other fellow betroths her, so she needs a get. Well, then if her Yavam was a Koyin, Choletz la, so he should just do Chalitza with her, V'shaya lei, and then she is permitted to the other fellow who betrothed her, right? Because if she gets a get from this fellow who betrothed her, well, then she's a divorcee, and her Yavam, who is a Koyin, would be unable to marry her as a divorcee. So we're saying, if that's the case, so then just let the Yavam do Chalitza, and then let her. Oh, now my brother's really yelling. Oh, that's good. He's calling her to leave, which means that hopefully that sort of eliminates that threat. Yeah, they're yelling together now, but we still might get phone calls or things like that. Okay, so just let. Oh, yelling. Apparently they're not going anywhere. Wait, what? No, they have to go. No, please go. They're probably talking about something else. Imay Yevama Koyin Chalitza, right? V'sharile. No, so just have the Yavam do Chalitza, and then let her stay married to this other fellow. So Izguri Iskar Imken Matzinu Chote Niskar. But if that's the case, then we're basically rewarding this fellow who betrothed her when he wasn't supposed to. Right, he betrothed her. And we're saying that, but if the Yavam is a Koyin, so then let the Yavam do Chalitza and let her stay married to this guy who betrothed her, even though he wasn't supposed to. So, Ella im ayu Yevama Yisrael nosin la sheni get bat v'hutralo. Rather, what it should be is that no, if the Yavam was a Yisrael, oh, door slammed and they're out of here. That's one person. Okay, Ashley's gone. Hopefully Ariel's with her. Okay, so now, fine. So imaya Yevama Yisrael nosin la sheni get v'hutralo. So if the Yevama was a Yisrael, so then the fellow who betrothed her should give her a get. Now she's a divorcee, but she's permitted to Yisrael, and then let the Yavam either do Yibum or Chalitza. Amar of Gidol, Amar of Chia bar Yosef, Amar Rav Yevama Kiddushin Ein Ba Nisuin Yesh Ba. You hear that? Interesting statement. It says of Gidol in the name of Rav Chia bar Yosef in the name of Rav that a Yevama there's no Kiddushin but Nisuin Yesh Ba, but there is Nisuin. There's no Kiddushin, but there is Nisuin. Kiddushin ein ba, nisuin nami ein ba. I don't understand. If there's no kiddushin, then there's no nisuin either. So ema kiddushin v'nisuin ein ba. Okay, so say that by a shomeres yavam, there's no kiddushin or nisuin. Fine. V'bay sema. If you want, I will say my nisuin yesh ba. What does it mean that there's nisuin? Kiznus. It's nisuin. That's like znus. Kidu Rav Hamnuna, the Amar of Hamnuna, shomeres yavam shezinsa. That if you have a shomeres yavam who was mizaneh, asur li Yevama, she's no longer allowed to be with her yavam. Okay, so that if she gets married, then she's no longer allowed to be with her yavam. V'bay same if you want to say la'olam kedamar meikar. That originally it's like we said initially, kiddushin ein ba nisuin yesh ba. That there's no kiddushin, but there is nisuin. The michlefa be'isha shalach ba'alam dinasiyam, because we're concerned, meaning it means that there's no kiddushin, but there's nisuin to the extent that she needs to get a get. Because otherwise, if we say that in this case, that she got married to some other guy, she wouldn't have to get a get. So then we might get confused with a situation where, like our Mishnah, right? That the husband apparently they came and said that the husband's dead, so then she married some other guy, and then we might think that in that, right? So our Mishnah said that you have to get a get. If he comes back, you have to get a get from both of them. So to be consistent, just like in our Mishnah, she needs to get from both of them. So also, if she marries some other guy when she really had to do Yibum, she's going to have to get a get there as well. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yanai v'chabura nimnu v'gamru. So it says Rabbi Yanai that in a chabura, in a group, they decided in kiddushin tovsim b'yevame that kiddushin is not tofes by a Yevama, right? You have Reuven's married to Sarah, Reuven dies, Shimon and Sarah need to do Yibum, and then some other guy comes and betroths Sarah. So that betrothing is not really a betrothing, it doesn't work. Amalei Rabbi Yechanan. Now Rabbi Yechanan says to Rabbi Yanai, what do you mean they decided in a group? Rebbe, lo mishnasenu izo. Isn't this a Mishnah? The Tananis, we learn in a Mishnah, Omer leisha, that a fellow who says to a woman, Hariyat mikudeshes li, you are betrothed to me, lachash es gayer, but here's the thing, I'm a Gentile right now, but don't worry, I'm converting. So I'm betrothing you, and it's going to kick in later once I convert. Lachash es gari, or after you convert. Lachash es shtachrer, I'm currently a slave, but once I'm freed, lachash es tishtachri, or you are currently a Canaanite maidservant, but when you are free, lachash yomus bailech, I'm betrothing you after your husband dies. That seems risky. Alright? You're now a married woman. I'm betrothing you, but don't worry. It's not for now. It's for once your husband dies. Okay. Or I'm marrying you, but the thing is that I'm married to your sister. But I'm betrothing you not for now, but only for after your sister dies. Or after your Yavam does Chalitza with you, then my betrothing will kick in. So what do we see? So Einu Mekudeshes. In any of those cases, it does not work. So it says Rabbi Yochanan to Rabbi Yana, I don't understand. What do you mean in a group they decided that the halacha is that Kiddushin is not tofes by a Yevama? We see in this Mishnah that if a fellow says, I'm betrothing you for after your Yavam does Chalitza with you, and we say it doesn't work. So we see that Kiddushin does not work by a Shomeres Yavam. So Amrle, so Rabbi Yanai says to Rabbi Yochanan, Ilav daloi la chaspa mi mishkachas magnisa tuse. Rabbi Yanai says, Givaldig, you're 100% right. But he then points out as well that it was a team effort. Yes, you're right. That the Mishnah does demonstrate that Kiddushin is not tofes by a Yevama, by a Shomeres Yavam. But it was a team effort, right? I kind of, if not for the fact that I pointed out that there was this group that decided that Kiddushin is not tofes, you would not then have said, but wait a minute, don't we already know that from a Mishnah? So it was basically, you're right, but, you didn't say that out of nowhere. It was sort of a, group effort. I kicked off the conversation. Okay. I'm the Rish Lakish. Says Rish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan, Ilav de kalsoch de gaberabo hava aminaloch ono. So Rish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, if not for the fact that they praise you as being, if not for the fact that Rabbi Yanai praise you for being such a great person, Hava Amina Lachana, I would have responded to you, which is also super interesting, right? Because that was like the whole relationship between Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, right? That Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan really got at it. Right? Rish Lakish would ask him always a million questions, wouldn't let Rabbi Yochanan get away with anything. And that's the story in Baba Metzia that we'll get to, I don't know, maybe another year or two. Probably not a year, probably more like 2 years. Right, the story with Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan killed Rish Lakish, and then Rabbi Lazar ben Pidas became his chavrusa, and just it wasn't the same. Whereas Rish Lakish would ask him a million questions on everything, Rabbi Lazar ben Pidas would give him a million supports for everything that he said, but he preferred being challenged. And anyway, so we see that Rish Lakish is saying to Rabbi Yochanan, he's saying, look, who am I to argue with Rabbi Yanai? Rabbi Yanai seems to be praising you, but Rish Lakish says the fact of the matter is, I would ask you the following question. That we have a Mishnah that says, right, Ava Amina Lach Ona Masnisin, Rabbi Akiva, I would have said that this Mishnah over here, which is saying that if he says to a Yevama that I'm betrothing you to kick in after Chalitza, and we're saying it doesn't work, that's Davka Rabbi Akiva, the Amar in Kiddushin Tovsin B'chai V'Lavin. That Kiddushin is not Tovs B'chai V'Lavin, right? So we're saying that he's Mekadesh Yevama and it doesn't work. That's because it's Rabbi Akiva, who says that, Yevama is Chai V'Lavin, and Kiddushin isn't Tofes, but that's specifically the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. But V'i Rabbi Akiva, Ki Amar L'Lacha Shiachlutz Loch Yevama Echlit V'Sei Ba Kiddushin. But 1 second. Rish Lakish, if in fact this is Rabbi Akiva, right? Dashamina lelu Rabbi Akiva, the Amar Adam Makna Davar Shlo Bala Olam. The Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that a person can make sort of a transaction on something that has not yet happened yet, something that will happen in an event that will happen in the future. And therefore, if this is Rabbi Akiva, sure, Rabbi Akiva says that Kiddushin is not Tofes by Chai V'Lavin. Sure, Rabbi Akiva says that you cannot betroth a Yevama. However, what's he saying? He's saying that this betrothal should only kick in after Chalitza. And Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that you can do that. You can make a stipulation based on something that has not yet happened, based on a future event. Therefore, if this was Rabbi Akiva, there should be no problem. Let him say, yeah, I'm betrothing you now, but it's really only going to take effect after Chalitza, at which point you're not a Yevama anymore. If a wife says to her husband, hey husband, any of the things that I make from now on, you don't have access to. Ein tzarich la'ofer, says the Tanna Kamma, doesn't even need to be made for that neder, because she can't really do that. Rabbi Akiva Omer says, Rabbi Akiva, Yofer, no, he should be made for that neder. Shematay defalav Yosem and Aroi lo. That says Rabbi Akiva that actually he should be made for the neder because what would happen? There's a certain amount that she produces that the husband has sort of a right to, but anything above that amount is hers. And therefore, she could say whatever she wants about that extra. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva is saying that she could make, in this case, a vow based on something in the future, based on, well, maybe in the future she will produce more than the amount that would Memela go to him. So therefore, says, so therefore we see that Rabbi Akiva says that you could make a transaction or you can make a stipulation based on something that will happen, based on an event that will happen in the future. Ha'it marla, to which the Gemara says, but it says Rav Huna Amar Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua be'omeris ikadshu yodai le'oseim yodayim isnu ba'alma. It says Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua, no, that is Davka talking about where she says that it's Davka what she's making right now, that those things are in the world. That she's saying that basically anything that she's going to be making from this point on should not belong to the husband anymore, in which case it's not something in the future, and therefore it's not a proof that Rabbi Akiva is talking about, it's not a proof to say that this teaches that Rabbi Akiva says that you can make a stipulation on something that will occur in the future. Now this statement of Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua, who says that it's talking about now, that Rabbi Akiva is talking about now, Rabbi Akiva is not talking about the future, that argues on Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Huna kirav, that Rav Huna holds like Rav, Rav kirebi, and Rebbe, right? So Rav Huna holds like his Rebbe Rav, Rav holds like his Rebbe, okay, I'm sorry, Rabbi Yanai holds like Rabbi Yanai, Rabbi Yanai kirebi, Rabbi Yanai is like Rebbe, no, Rabbi Yanai is Rabbi Chia kirebi, and that's really Rebbe. Rebbe Kirab Meir, sorry, it's a little confusing. Not confusing, just a tongue twister. Reb Meir Kirab Eliezer ben Yaakov, Eliezer ben Yaakov Kirab Akiva. Okay, I basically butchered that, but basically a whole chain of rabbis going all the way up to Rabbi Akiva, that a fellow is actually able to make a transaction, a stipulation on something that has not yet come into the world, something that will occur in the future. So we see that all of these rabbis talk, all that Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that you would be able to make a Tanai on something that has not happened yet. Friends, that was Daf Tzadi Beis, Masechta Yevamos. I hope you enjoyed even through all of those distractions. Peace out.